In the middle of 1919, Michael Collins set about organising the IRA intelligence unit and a squad, a group to track down and target and assassinate different members of the Dublin Metropolitan Police G Division, which worked on political activities, so against the IRA, Sinn Féin, communists and anything else that would work against the British power in Ireland. With spies such as Ned Broyne, David Nelligan, he was able to draw up lists of DMP detectives to be targeted and assassinated. Some of those stories and graves will be included here in the video. Once that was kind of successful, people were sent in from outside of Dublin and who weren't originally from the area, such as John Charles Redmond from Armagh, and other detectives to investigate the finances of the squad. And those stories and graves will also be included here. And then finally, on the 21st of November 1920, Bloody Sunday, took place across Dublin with members of the squad, the Dublin Brigade and the Dublin Active Service units targeting between 15 and 20 targets across Dublin. And a number of those people are buried here. Most of them who were actual spies from London and across the UK were sent back, their bodies were sent back, but a few of them were buried in Dublin. So I've aimed to include a number of those targets of the squad in this video. So this will be the graves and the little bit of story behind targets of Michael Collins' squad. Next up on my list is a man who has the unenviable position of being the first man executed by Michael Collins' squad. Patrick Smith, who was nicknamed the Dog by his enemies, maybe by his colleagues as well, was so the G Division, which he worked in within Dublin Metropolitan Police, were warned to stop their political activity, but supposedly Patrick Smith was very vocal that he was not going to stop and that he was going to find Michael Collins. Patrick Smith was an Irishman as well. I cannot remember the county he was from off the top of my head now, but he was executed in 1919 by the first formation of the squad, which included Vinnie Byrne and Mick MacDonald, among other members. So he was shot a number of times with revolvers and managed to make it to his house, but due to how many bullets it took to actually take him down, the squad were supposedly started using .45 ammunition instead of .38. I think that's like the story behind that. But Patrick Smith was the first man executed by the squad. So you'll see it here. Patrick Smith, G Division DMP, so Dublin Metropolitan Police, who died on 8th of September 1919 from bullet wounds received while gallantly doing his duty, aged 50 years. I cannot remember off the top of my head where he was from. And then that's his wife, like a dedication to her. The family had to leave, well, were kind of ostracised, which happened to a lot of families during the War of Independence. So they were ostracised, and obviously the breadwinner of the family had been executed, so they fled and moved to Blackpool, and I think that's where she died, so that's just a dedication to her. So yeah, he also buried in Glasnevin, so buried within a 10-minute walk of the people who ordered his execution, but that is what happens in war sometimes. So yeah, Patrick Smith, G Division of Dublin Metropolitan Police. More attacks were planned, and another man who was targeted was Daniel Hoy, or Hoy, I think is pronounced his name. He was 31 years old, and he had helped arrest members following the 1916 Easter Rising, and he'd also started targeting IRA and Sinn Féin members following the start of the War of Independence. So he was the second official G Division man targeted by Michael Collins' squad, and he was killed in September 1919, and he is buried here in Rhodes in County Offaly, where he was originally from. So this is the family grave of the Hoy family, and this is Daniel Hoy. So died September 1919, aged 31 years old. So a lot of the RIC and detectives who are actually Irish born So a lot of people believe that the IRA targeted British soldiers and military, which is true, but that was mainly true after the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries arrived. Before that, most RIC and detectives who were killed were Irish born. So Patrick Smith was from Leitrim, and then Daniel Hoy was from Rhodes in County Offaly. And yeah, that was his grave. So he was the second official G Division man targeted and killed by the squad. Now this will just cut into the video, but following the deaths of Patrick Smith and Dan Hoy, there was a couple of other executions of DMP officers, such as John Burton, and I think another one was Michael Sweeney or Michael O'Neill. Can't remember the name off the top of my head. But they're buried down the country, one in Cork and one in Clare, I think. And then a man was sent from Armagh, I think it's John Charles Redmond, and in the movie Michael Collins he's depicted dying in a car bomb, but he was actually shot by Paddy O'Daly, and he's buried in Mount Jerome Cemetery. And I was able to locate the general area, but there's over 100 graves, and there's lots of them are worn down because they're all very old, so I wasn't able to actually locate his grave. But he wasn't killed in a car bomb, because I don't think they even had car bombs back then, but he was killed by Paddy O'Daly, so he's actually buried. Him, David Nelligan and Redmond and Paddy O'Daly, are all buried within a few hundred metres of each other. So the man that gave him up, most likely gave him up, the man that executed him, and the victim himself are all buried very close to one another. But I just wanted to give a quick background there, and we'll get back to the video. Throughout the intelligence war during the War of Independence, there were plenty of people killed on both sides, born on the island of Ireland. One of them was Mr. Alan Bell. He was an RIC officer for over 20 years. He'd worked against the Land League investigating where they were getting their finances, and then also gathered information against Parnell during the Home Rule efforts in the late 1890s and the early 1900s. After that he became a magistrate, so he worked across Cavan, Armagh and a couple of other counties in the centre of Ireland, and then during the very start of the War of Independence he was sent to Dublin to investigate the finances of Sinn Féin and the IRA. Because he was successful in some of his attempts, so he was able to get back some money. I think he seized over £70,000 or £7,000. I'm not 100% sure on the exact figures, but he also was warned to stop investigating along with other DMP officers and people working in Dublin Castle, but he refused to do so, and rather than move into Dublin Castle he stayed living outside. And he was then captured he was actually taken off a tram by the squad and executed in South Dublin. So this is the grave of, where are we now? This is the grave of Alan Bell. So he was a magistrate and an inspector for the Dublin Metropolitan Police and the Royal Irish Constabulary. So here it is. To the proud and beloved memory of Alan Bell, who died in Dublin on the 26th of March 1920, aged 62. Duty well done through many years, even unto death. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Okay, so that's the inscription. So that's the grave of Alan Bell. So I'll just give it a little readout now. So at the junction of Summers Court and Sandymount Avenue and Marion Road in Ballsbridge, a group of men immobilised a crowded vehicle and surrounded their target, declaring, "Come on, Mr. Bell, your time has come." Bundled him off the street. They shot him dead in public view and ran from the scene. And there was although there was witnesses, there was no one came forward to actually identify who the assassins were, but they were a member of Michael Collins' squad, and it was because he was actually gaining some traction in finding the funds that Michael Collins was raising. And then he also was investigating those who had attacked Lord French's car, who were members of the squad. So he was a high target for the squad. So that was Alan Bell. On the morning of the 21st of November 1920, Michael Collins sent out a large unit of IRA men consisting of the Dublin Brigade, the Dublin ASU and the squad, in order to execute and assassinate a number of spies and different British and intelligence military targets across Dublin. Most of this occurred in South Dublin, in the South Dublin area and along O'Connell Street. Now, during the early morning attacks, 13 targets were killed and 1 civilian. Of those, I've been able to find the graves of 4 of the targets who were buried in Dublin. And of 4 of the targets buried in Dublin, 3 of those are buried in Glasnevin, and their videos will appear up here in a few minutes. But one of them is buried in Grangegorman Military Cemetery, and that is Donald, I think it was Donald MacLean. He was a former Scottish soldier who was recruited as an intelligence officer, and he was captured in County Clare and given an opportunity to leave Ireland, and he was given 5 days to leave by the East Clare IRA. But when they found that he hadn't left, they passed on his information to Michael Collins, and he was in Dublin at the time of Bloody Sunday, and he was executed in 117 Moorhampton Road. This is the grave of Donald, I believe it's Donald MacLean. Yeah, Donald MacLean. Now, it was in Listonvarna that he was captured by the Clare IRA, and he was actually executed along with a civilian, Thomas Smith, whose grave I will hopefully have in a portion of this video. So this is in the Grangegorman Military Cemetery. You'll see from the other videos that only of the 4 men I did find, only 2 of them actually have headstones. The other 2 were possibly civilians, but their information will be in the other video. But that's Donald MacLean, and he is here towards the entrance to Grangegorman Military Cemetery, along with men who would have died in the 1916 Easter Rising and others killed during the War of Independence. But that's Donald MacLean. He was one of the other targets from Bloody Sunday. A civilian who was killed by the IRA on the morning of Bloody Sunday was, I think it's Thomas Herbert Smith. Now, I've located where his graveyard is in Drumcondra, but it's behind, it's a lot of work to get into it. So, and I believe he's buried in an unmarked grave, but he was killed he was killed alongside Donald MacLean. And I forgot to add a little bit, Donald MacLean, who was actually living with his family at the time, so he was living with his wife and children, and he asked to be shot. He asked not to be shot in front of them, to be taken away. So I just thought that last little piece of information. But Thomas Herbert Smith was his landlord, and he was a civilian, probably killed, maybe getting in the way, or just believed that he was a target also. But there are just a few of the other targets of Bloody Sunday. This is the grave of Captain John Fitzgerald, an Irish-born target of Bloody Sunday on the 21st of November 1920. He was from Tipperary, and he was aged only 22 years old when he was killed, and he was killed on 28 Earlsford Terrace. So it's believed that he was maybe mistaken for a different spy with a similar name, Clement Fitzpatrick, who actually left Ireland just after Bloody Sunday. But John Fitzgerald was a veteran of World War I, and he was actually a fighter pilot. He was shot down, I think he was shot down once and managed to escape, and eventually he returned to Ireland and joined the RIC in County Clare, and he was shot during an ambush 1 or 2 months before November 1920, and he left and moved to Dublin, or was recuperating in Dublin, but he was then targeted and killed on the morning of Bloody Sunday, along with a number of other spies and soldiers across Dublin. So that's the grave of John Fitzgerald, and he's buried here in Glasnevin Cemetery, just overlooking O'Connell Tower.
So there was a man named Fitzgerald, or Fitzmaurice, I've forgotten which. I met him in the castle. He had only one arm. I met him in the castle that day, Saturday. And my job was poking around to see who these fellas were. So I was talking to 3 or 4 more fellas, and I got talking with them. I knew some of them, Englishmen. So I said to your man who was an Irishman, what are you doing here? Oh, it's the same in the run from the IRA up from Clare. Where are you staying now? Says I. I'm staying at 28 up Pembroke Street. I knew that place was a haunt of secret servicemen. He was shot.
After a little while of searching, I have come across the unmarked grave of Patrick Francis McCormack. He was a native of Mayo, I believe, and he was shot and killed on the morning of Bloody Sunday, 21st November 1920, in the Gresham Hotel, in the mistaken belief that he was a spy. He was a veterinary surgeon working with the horses of the British cavalry, but he wasn't a spy or operating in any way against the IRA or Sinn Féin, and it's believed that he was actually a nationalist. And his mother, Kate McCormack, she wrote to the Minister of Defence, Richard Mulcahy, protesting his killing, and Michael Collins actually replied in a kind of an apology, saying there was no particular charge against him except that he was an enemy soldier. So I think she took up the fact that he was being marked as a spy or maybe a traitor against his own people, whereas he wasn't. So, well, in that regard, he wasn't actually a spy working against his own people. But this is the unmarked grave of Patrick Francis McCormack, who is actually from Castlebar, he is buried here in Glasnevin Cemetery. So this is yet another unmarked grave of a target of Bloody Sunday 1920, and this is the grave of Lieutenant Leonard Aidan Wilde. He was the second man shot in Gresham Hotel, so along with McCormack. And newly released information proves, or at least validates, that he was a British intelligence officer, posing as a commercial traveller. He appears to have lived in Cuba, Spain and France, and according to his assassin James Cahill, he answered the door of the hotel declaring himself to be Alan Wilde, British intelligence officer, just back from Spain. So he obviously thought whoever was coming into the building was other British Army officers, but he was killed in the Gresham Hotel on Bloody Sunday, August 1922. And I believe he is the last of the official targets that I can find, and he's buried in St. Paul's Cemetery in Glasnevin.